Everybody, and welcome to a very special NCL profile interview with our guest star for the week on board the SS Norway, Roger Williams. Roger, great to have you back here with us. As everybody can tell, we're here in the Club International. It's late in the afternoon, and we'll be talking to Roger for a few minutes, and then we'll be throwing the floor open to some questions from the audience here in our studio, so to speak. Raj, you've been with us time and time again. It's always a pleasure to see you here. How many times has this been now?
This will be number 4.
Number 4. Mm-hmm. That's not often enough.
Thank you, Dave.
Right. I mean that sincerely. Roger Williams is one of the most pleasant guys to be around that we get on the ship, and everybody just enjoys it when we hear that you are coming back, and I mean that sincerely.
I bet you. Now you're putting me on the spot. I gotta be good tonight.
Yeah, you're always good, and that's for sure. One of the favorites. What have you been doing? We haven't seen you for a few months.
We've been moving. Mm-hmm. We did 16,000 miles in 1 week. A couple of weeks ago. Yeah, that's some kind of a record for me. I had my regular tour all scheduled, and on a Thursday I got a call from the White House, and they asked me to make a command performance before the President and both houses of Congress.
Holy mackerel.
And that was okay, but they wanted me on a Thursday night, mm-hmm. and I had a concert in Hawaii the next night, Friday night. So it was kind of tough to work out. Yeah. But they had a limousine with a motor running, and the minute I stepped off stage at the White House, they got me to the plane. They held the plane a little for me, and we traveled all night and made that. But the worst part was the night after Hawaii, we had another one in San Francisco, and then we had another one the next night in Detroit. So sometimes it gets kind of frantic.
How do you stay rested? Can you sleep on planes? Have you learned through the years to get your rest that way?
I've learned to sleep standing up. I really have.
Yeah. I know, because it takes a lot out of you when you perform. You just wait, folks, until you see this man at the piano. He works hard, and when he's finished, I know how tired you can be, and I'm just amazed that you could keep up a pace like that.
Well, I think I'm pretty lucky to be in music. I don't know how much you know about the musical scene, but I happen to have gone to Juilliard. Mm-hmm. Juilliard turns out 275 concert pianists every year. Of these 275, one every 3 years maybe can get on the concert stage in some degree. The rest end up teaching school, teaching piano, selling shoes, doing whatever they can. And I think I'm awfully lucky to have been in music as long as I have, mm-hmm. and have lasted. Yeah. I got one saying that I go by in life. Well, 2 sayings, actually. One of them is, take what you want out of life, but pay for it. And these long trips, and the lousy food, and the rooms that have already been rented when we got there are part of the pain.
I see.
But when I sit up at that piano and start to play, David, believe me, it makes it all worth it.
Oh, man.
But the rest you can have.
How did it all start? You're talking about being lucky. I call it more, you deserve it, because you've got it. I mean, but where did it begin? How did you start? Did you always know that you were a musician inside?
It was a funny thing. I've always considered my greatest talent a talent for work. Not especially music, a talent for work. I've always known what I wanted to do. And when I was a little kid, I was walking along the street one night, and this is no baloney. I saw a star up there, and I said, that star is going to be mine, and I don't care if I'm selling donuts the rest of my life. I'm going to make it, and I want to make it big. I was just reading a book this week. President Nixon sent me his new book called Leaders. Maybe you've heard about it. Mm-hmm. And he said that the one thing that really distinguishes a leader from anyone else is that most people wish for what they want in life, but a leader actually wills it. Mm-hmm. And he went down the line with Churchill and de Gaulle and MacArthur and all the other guys that he was really very closely acquainted with during his years in government. And he tells how every one of these men really wanted what they wanted. They actually willed what they were going to do, and they were willing to go through anything to get it. Now, maybe that's a sick quality. I don't know, David. But I do know that in my case, I've always wanted to really make it. And
to
especially
excel.
In music. Yes. Uh-huh.
And when you were young, how did you begin on the piano? Did you start? Did your mom say, "I want you to take piano lessons"? Or I know my mother did when I was young, and she said, "Sit down and play."
I guess most mothers do.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, when I was 3 years old, I just walked up to the piano and started to play.
When you were 3?
Uh-huh.
Holy mackerel!
And you know, I've never really been really sure what I believe in religiously. There are a lot of beautiful beliefs in this world, and everyone seems to have a different one. But I know that I was given a talent, because I just walked up and literally started to play. My dad was a preacher, and I remember I walked up to the piano and I started playing Stand Up for Jesus. I guess I had to stand up. I couldn't sit down. I was so small. But from that time on, I knew that something had been passed on to me from somewhere. I don't know where. But I knew I had to do it. And I think probably the worst crime in the world. I've seen so many great musicians in my life that really had talent. I mean, tremendous talent. And they drank it away or doped it away. And the world really never had a chance to see what these guys could do. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's about the worst crime in the whole world. Yes. Is not to develop a gift that you've been given. And I think every one of us has a very unique gift. And I guess we spend most of our life trying to develop that gift.
Yes. Uh-huh. When you were young and getting started in the business, was it a long struggle? Did you have a tough time? They talk about paying your dues and things like that.
Well, I didn't like to practice. Mm-hmm. I hated to practice. I loved to play. But every night when I got home from school, my mother would have a big pitcher of milk and a plate of cookies on the piano. And I'd practice until the cookies ran out. Then I'd run out. But at least she kept my interest, David. Uh-huh. She kept me kind of close to the piano in her way.
How did you get into recording? Did someone hear you playing, or did you...
Yes, uh-huh. When I was at Juilliard, a girl came up to me and she said, "I have an audition on Arthur Godfrey." Now, a lot of you remember Arthur Godfrey had a talent scout show for many years. And she said, "Would you come in and accompany me?" And I said, "Sure, I will." So she gave me the music, and the audition was at CBS, I remember, on a Friday afternoon at 1:30. And I was there at 1 o'clock, sitting there, and she never showed up. She got cold feet.
Oh, man.
So they came out, and they called her name, and they said, "June Kennedy, time to go on." And just for the heck of it, I said, "She isn't here. She couldn't make it." I said, "Will you listen to me?" And they said, "Well, that isn't very orthodox, but come on in, and we'll stop you when we're tired." So I went in and played, got on the show, won. And from there I went to Chance of a Lifetime, which was another show hosted by Dennis James. And that paid $1,000. That was a big deal for me, and I won that. In the meantime, I was heard by David Kapp. Now, this is a man who worked for RCA Victor and Decca for many years. He discovered Frankie Carl. He discovered Carmen Cavallero. He discovered Eddie Duchin. Mm-hmm. He liked piano players. Mm-hmm. And I was playing jazz at the time. And he heard me, and he said, "I've never heard anyone play the words like you play the words to a song." He said, when the song says, I love you, he said, your touch gets that way. When it says, I hate you, your touch gets very hard. He said, the only trouble is, he said, you're playing too much jazz. He said, just play the melody. He said, I want to record you. So we went into the studio, and the first day I got in there, I sat down at the piano, and I was ready to play, and he wheeled in a cigar store Indian. Now, this cigar store Indian stood about this high. And the guy had his hand up to his head like this. And Kapp had a sign over his head saying, "Where's the melody?" And every time I recorded for this man, he would wheel in this cigar store Indian with the sign, "Where's the melody?" So I learned to play the melody. And every time I would get off the melody and start playing a little too much jazz, he'd point to the Indian from back behind the glass partition.
What a great
there.
story that is.
Yeah, it's the truth, David. And
oh my gosh.
so we had a whole career. My first single record for him was
You and Mr. Kapp and the Indian had a whole career.
That's right, had a whole career. And the first record was Autumn Leaves.
That was your first one?
And I think the biggest frustration of my life is I've never been able to top it since. Maybe I didn't have enough Indians there. I don't know what.
Yeah, but to start with a smash, all-time favorite like Autumn Leaves.
Yeah, it went real well. In fact, it wasn't even my recording session, David, when I recorded it. He was a guy that acted very impulsively. A lot of great guys are that way. They don't plan too many things. They kind of see what's going on, and then they make their plans around that.
Make it go.
And I got a call from him on Friday night, and he said, I'm recording Jane Morgan. Remember her? She did Fascination and a few other big hits. And he said, she only has 3 tunes ready for the session. And he said, we're bringing her in Monday afternoon. He said, this is Friday. He said, you know Autumn Leaves? And I said, you mean Falling Leaves? I didn't even know the right title. I said, yeah, I've heard it. And he said, well, if we have time in the session, he said, why don't you make an arrangement and come in, and we'll do it. So I came in, and it was Jane's first big recording, and all the photographers there, and there wasn't even a seat. I sat over in the corner on the floor. And when she finished, there was 11 minutes left in that doggone session. And he said, we got 11 minutes. He said, let's just record it. He said, don't even rehearse it. So I recorded it, and it turned out pretty good. The guys read the music well, and he said, it's too long. In those days, a disc jockey would never play a record if it was over 3 minutes. They had to get their commercials in. So he said, play those runs a little faster. I said, by golly, I'll try. He said, we have time for one more take. And so we did it. And it timed out 2:59. If you play the record, it's 2 minutes and 59 seconds. And I went home that day, and I was 2 months behind in the apartment rent. And my biggest hope was that maybe I would get that apartment rent money back.
Out of that recording session.
And I've been gathering green leaves ever since.
How many recordings have you made? How many records have you made now?
I just made my 76th album.
Oh my goodness!
And I got to tell you about the new album. And I'm not plugging it, honest. Well, maybe I am, but it's kind of unusual because I got a call from Paul McCartney. You know, that's the guy with the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I really like your playing. I said, you like my playing? Well, I said, I like your composing. I said, I think you're great. And he said, why don't you do an album for me? So I just did a 2-pocket album for Paul McCartney. And he recorded the orchestra parts in England with the Royal Philharmonic, 65 musicians. And he sent the tracks over, and I recorded my part on top. And it turned out just great. He's really thrilled with it. He's held up the release on it for about 3 weeks because he wanted to do the cover over himself. He's quite an artist. He does a lot of things.
I can't wait to hear that.
You know that this man made $26 million last year? That's what he brought home. He's probably the richest entertainer in the world right now.
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney.
And it all started with "I Want to Hold Your Hand"? Was that
Something
what it was?
like that. You never know.
In 1963, I think, was when the Beatles first made their
That's
big
right.
record.
But talk about ambition. This guy wants to know everything you're going to do, how you're going to do it. He wants to supervise everything. He wants to do the artwork. He's into everything.
Have you met him personally?
He's quite a guy. I talked to him on the phone. I haven't met him personally, no.
I wonder what he's really like in person. You've met, we were talking before, all the presidents?
Yeah, I played for all the presidents since Harry Truman, with the exception of Jimmy Carter. I had an invitation to play for him, but we had another date that night. Just couldn't work it in, and he never invited me back. So maybe he got mad. I don't know.
Anyway, who did you like the best? I mean, you've met now. Well, that would be Truman and Eisenhower, Mr. Kennedy and Johnson, Ford, Nixon, Reagan. Am I putting you on the spot if I said
No.
Who's your favorite?
Well, that's like saying who's my favorite piano player.
Yeah.
Every one of these men did something that I admired, and every one of them had a tremendous personality. Well, that's all except President Johnson. I couldn't get very close to him, but he was quite an intellect. But the first time I played for Harry Truman, he asked me to play privately for him. You know, he was a piano player.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought he played Missouri Waltz. I mean, that's all I thought he knew. And I played for him for over an hour. And when I got through, he said, I'm going to play for you now. And so I expect him to play something very simple. Actually, he sat down and he played the Chopin C-sharp minor waltz. Now, this is a pretty tough tune. The middle goes da 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 da, very fast. And he played it well. He maybe made 2 mistakes in the whole thing. And when he got through, I said, Mr. President, I said, you would have made a great pianist. And boy, he just snapped back at me like that. He said, you know, a hell of a lot of people wish I had stuck with it.
The
buck stops here. And he was very, very quick. Now, a person like Nixon, who was as kind and as generous as anybody I've ever played for in my life, especially the family, wonderful people. He was very quiet, laid back. Kennedy was, just a great guy. Everybody loved this guy. Eisenhower, his favorite song was Autumn Leaves, so I was in free with him.
I should say.
And Mamie was a real sweetheart. I played for her just about a year before she died. Again. And she's a lovely lady.
How about President Reagan? He's supposed to have a great sense of humor.
Yeah, he's terrific.
Yeah.
This time, I told you I played for the president in both houses of Congress, and they couldn't have it actually in the White House. They had it right in back of the White House. And they put a big shell in the backyard. And I went over in the Marine barracks because I played the concert with the Marine band. I went over in the morning to rehearse with them. And I put on the dirtiest old clothes. I mean, just, really practicing clothes. And when I got through, they said, well, we got to go over to the White House and check out the sound system. And I said, well, I'm not dressed. They said, we don't have time. Go on over. So I went over, and I was sitting there playing the piano in the backyard of the White House, and all of a sudden I felt this on my shoulder, and here was President Reagan. And he greeted me. But I think the saddest thing about it all is that I've been to the White House a great many times. This man had 15 or 16 guards around him in his own backyard. And that night when I played, if you can imagine the White House here, and I was playing back here in the shell, and I looked up on the roof, and they must have had 7 or 8 guys up there. They looked like frogmen with guns on the roof of the White. It looked like a James Bond movie. And I just couldn't help but think how things have changed since I played. It was so informal at the beginning, and now they have to protect this poor guy like, in his own backyard like that.
That's a sad commentary.
It really is. It was sad to me.
Yeah.
But they're wonderful people, and believe me, they have paid the price. There are three kinds of people in the world, to me. They're the people that make things happen. They're the people that let things happen. And then they're the people that stand around and say, "What happened?" You know. And every one of these men really made it happen.
Yeah.
If you ever go out on a political campaign and take some of the things that they took, some of the back talk that they have to take, and the backbiting that they get,
derogatory remarks.
These men really made it happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, feel like answering a few questions?
Sure I do.
All right. Anybody out in the audience have a question? Dave Grisell is coming up right now. Please leave your hand up even when someone else is asking a question, because then he can see where to go for the next one. All right?
I'd like to know if your hands are insured.
No, they're not. Lloyd's would never insure my hands. I had a motorcycle, and I've done a lot of boxing, and I do some judo, and they weren't interested. So I don't have any insurance on my hands, and I figure that if something happens to my hands, why, by golly, I'm going back to selling donuts or whatever. I don't worry too much about my hands, although I have very small hands, and they tell me that I hit the piano harder than any pianist. Maybe that's because of my fighting experience. There's very little difference between a left jab to the body and a left jab to the piano. It's the same. And because I do have small hands, why, sometimes I actually split the ends of my fingers open. And that gets pretty sore. But I still play.
Another question over here.
And most musicians have to carry their own instruments around. I wonder how you find the pianos.
He's really putting me on the spot. If I could carry a piano on my back and not have a hernia, believe me, I'd carry my piano wherever I go. Pianos are as different as automobiles, and you never know when you go into a place what you're going to get. Now, the piano here on the ship was a very fine piano a couple years ago, but they've played it every night and every day, and it needs some work now. And I'd give anything for my old piano, but this is still a good piano. You're going to get a great concert tonight, if I have anything to say about it.
You have your own piano tuner with you, right?
Is he here? Yeah,
I
Maury Taubman. He came on board with his wife.
Uh-huh.
But he'll be working on the piano all afternoon, all night before the concert, so I think it's going to be ready.
What kind of piano do you have, Roger?
Well, again, that's a personal taste. Everybody likes their own kind of piano. I really enjoy the Steinway.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because with a Steinway, I can get like 40 different graduations of tone, which I don't seem to be able to get on other makes of pianos.
Mm-hmm. All right, there's another question. Go ahead.
Would you mind sharing the month and date of your birth?
Yes, 1924, October 1st.
All right. Maybe this gentleman is interested in, are you in...
I can see everybody counting now. How old is he?
Are you interested in astrology, sir? Is that... Yes. Okay, that's why he wanted to know. Here's another question over here.
I have an interesting little story to tell. Last night, my wife and I had been to one of the shows, and on the way back, we were going to make a shortcut and go through the theater, which is going to our cabin, and we did, and someone was up there playing piano, and we sat down way in the back, and my wife said, who is that plays so well? And I said, I don't know, there's some young man up there playing. And she said, no one could play like that but Roger Williams. Because we had been looking for him on board the ship, and my question is, Roger, where did they pick you up this time on the cruise, and have you been on board all this time?
Yeah, I've been on board. I'm a real quiet guy, though. I don't get out too much, and I haven't done too many of the activities. And you were talking about a piano a minute ago. This piano in the Saga Theater is being used from 9 o'clock in the morning until midnight. And the only time I can get into practice is from about 1 o'clock until 6 in the morning. So I've been sleeping during the days, and I've been practicing at nights because that's the only time I can get in.
Another question, David? Go ahead.
You sound like you helped write the book, The Power of Positive Thinking. But what do you do to stay up? Do you pray? Do you play?
Gee, that's a good question. I think I do what I don't like to do the most, and that's exercise. That's helped me a lot to keep a positive mental attitude, believe it or not. I run 2.5 miles every day. And I got to tell you, I hate every step of it. I had a doctor tell me a very interesting thing once, and I don't know if it's true or not, but boy, it sure turned my life around. He said, for every day you don't exercise now, someday you're going to have to spend that day in the hospital. And that scared me. I don't know why it did, but I really thought about that. And since I've started to exercise, since I've started to run, I haven't had a cold now for nearly 5 years. I haven't missed a concert in 30 years. Yes, I missed one. My plane was snowbound in Des Moines, Iowa, and I couldn't get to Omaha. But hi. That's the only concert I've ever missed. And I didn't have very good health as a child. But I've had just sensational health since. And of course I have a whole library of self-help books. And I'm not going to tell you to do that, except I read everybody. And I want to know about everything that I can. But I'm a very selfish person. I want to develop me as much as I can. And I realize that what works for one person probably wouldn't work for me. It might and it might not. But I've spent my whole life trying to discover what I'm about. And that's why I haven't gotten too interested or involved in a lot of other things in life, because I really am trying to find out what makes me tick. Mm-hmm. That's the only way I can get through life. Of course, I've been a very dear friend of Dr. Schuler. I don't know if you ever hear the Hour of Power on Sunday. And this guy is really a dynamo. And Norman Vincent Peale. And I have a self-help book library that's just huge. I read a lot of things like that. But if you ask me to pin it down, I really can't. Except that I know when I like me, I like you. And when I hate me, I hate you. So I spend most of my life trying to like me.
Question over here.
2 questions. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and used to make a yearly appearance there with a concert. And we haven't seen you in several years. Did you cut down on your schedule? And the second question is, what is the name of your new album?
Okay, the first question is, I've done a lot of tours, international tours, and I have cut down. I still perform a lot, but I've done a lot out of the country. Second question is, the name of the album is Ivory Impact.
Mm-hmm. Good one. Roger, how much do you practice? You talked about you couldn't get any practice time in the Saga Theater. How often do you practice? Or how often and how much? How long?
Well, practice has always been another thing that I don't especially like to do, but again, I pay the price for it. Mm-hmm. When I'm home, I practice 7-8 hours a day.
Goodness gracious. That's a lot. Holy cow. Raj, you've been in the business now for, 30 years or so? I have a pet question, a favorite question that I like to ask the entertainers that come through. In that 30 years, there must be something that you can look back on now with a real smile, something that really just at the time tickled your funny bone, or something that at the time didn't seem so funny that happened to you while you were performing or in relations to show business that you look back on it now and you just have to chuckle because of what happened. You know, maybe it wasn't funny at the time, but have you got anything like that? Anything that you can recall?
I think the last thing that happened to me that it isn't funny, but it's kind of amusing. We opened, you were talking about appearing in Tulsa. We opened the season in Port Arthur, Texas. And the first concert was in...
Miss Iris Robinson of Pool Deck 118. Miss Iris Robinson of Pool Deck 118. Kindly contact the radio station at 1530.
That was our first concert, Iris Robinson. Anyway, we got in the afternoon, and they'd had the doggone piano stored in the basement all summer. And if you know Port Arthur, Texas, or any place south like that, it's very damp. And so they brought the piano up on stage, and I sat down at the darn thing, and I pushed the key down, and it stayed down. And I pushed the next one down, and it stayed down, and I went right up the deal, and I yelled for the piano tuner. I said, "Gee whiz," I said, "what are you going to do?" He said, "We're in real trouble." He said, "The dampness has gotten into all the hammers, and they're all sticking." Well, I played the first concert for the Kiwanis Club. They sponsored it. So the head of the club was standing by me, and he said, "Hey," he said, "I got an idea." I said, "I hope you do, because I don't know what I'm going to do tonight." He said, "Let's dry out those hammers." And I said, "That's going to take hours." He said, "Look, I'll have all the wives of the Kiwanis come in with their hair dryers." He said, "We'll take the lid off the top of the piano, and we'll plug them in all the way around the edge." And here was all these gals with their hair dryers like this. Wonder we didn't blow a fuse, because it was... And they actually got the piano ready, and I played it that night. It sounded great.
Oh, my goodness. To the rescue. Roger, thank you very much for being with us, and I hope that you come back again sooner than you came back the last time. It's always a pleasure to have you here.
I'll be back 4 times this year, so it's going to be pretty good.
Terrific. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Roger Williams, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.